Russian Revolution of 1917 was one of the most significant political events of the 20th century, marking the end of centuries of imperial rule and the establishment of a socialist state. It fundamentally transformed Russian society, politics, and economy, and a profound impact on the global ideological landscape. Background: the long road to revolution. The seeds of revolution in Russia were sown long before 1917. Several factors contributed to the growing discontent among various strata of Russian society. 1. Autocratic rule. Russia had been ruled by the Romanov dynasty since 1613. The monarchy was characterized by autocratic rule, where the Tsar wielded absolute power. This system left little room for political reform or public participation. 2. Social inequality. Russian society was deeply stratified. The vast majority of the population were peasants who lived in poverty, while the aristocracy and clergy enjoyed significant wealth and privileges. Industrial workers, though a smaller group, faced harsh working conditions and low wages. 3. Economic problems. Despite some industrialization in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Russia's economy remained largely agrarian. Peasants suffered from land shortages and heavy taxation, leading to widespread rural unrest. 4. Military failures. Russia's defeat in the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, and its disastrous involvement in World War I, 1914-1918, exposed the weaknesses of the Tsarist regime. The war placed immense strain on the economy, led to severe food shortages, and caused widespread disillusionment with the government. 5. Revolution of 1905. The 1905 revolution, triggered by the Bloody Sunday massacre, was a precursor to 1917. Although it forced Tsar Nicholas II to issue the October Manifesto, promising limited reforms, these measures failed to address the underlying issues. The Duma, parliament, established after 1905, had limited powers and was frequently dissolved. Here's the copied text. The February Revolution, the fall of the Romanovs. The first phase of the Russian Revolution, known as the February Revolution, began in early 1917. A combination of war weariness, economic hardship, and political repression led to mass protests in Petrograd, now St. Petersburg. The February Revolution, the fall of the Romanovs. The first phase of the Russian Revolution, known as the February Revolution, began in early 1917. A combination of war weariness, economic hardship, and political repression led to mass protests in Petrograd, now St. Petersburg. Protests and strikes. In February 1917, workers in Petrograd went on strike to demand better wages and working conditions. These strikes soon turned into mass demonstrations, with participants calling for bread and peace. 2. Collapse of authority. The Tsar's attempts to suppress the protests failed. Mutinies broke out in the army, and the police were unable to control the situation. The loss of support from the military and key political figures forced Nicholas II to abdicate on March 2, 1917, ending over 300 years of Romanov rule. 3. The Provisional Government. After the abdication, a provisional government was established, led by Prince Georgy Lvov and later by Alexander Kerensky. This government aimed to implement democratic reforms and continue the war effort. However, it faced significant challenges from the outset. 4. Dual power. Alongside the provisional government, the Petrograd Soviet of Workers' and Soldiers' Deputies emerged as a powerful body representing workers and soldiers. This created a situation of dual power, where two entities vied for control, leading to political instability. The October Revolution. The Bolsheviks seize power. The second phase of the Russian Revolution, known as the October Revolution, took place in November 1917, October in the Julian calendar. This phase saw the Bolsheviks, a faction of the Marxist Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, seize power. 1. Rise of the Bolsheviks. Under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, the Bolsheviks gained significant support among workers and soldiers by promising peace, land, and bread. They opposed the provisional government's decision to continue the war and called for immediate peace. Lenin's return and April theses. Lenin, who had been in exile, returned to Russia in April 1917 with the help of the Germans. He issued the April Theses, which outlined his vision for a socialist revolution, including the overthrow of the provisional government and the transfer of power to the Soviets. 3. The Kornilov Affair. In August 1917, an attempted coup by General Lavur Kornilov aimed at restoring order backfired. The provisional government's reliance on the Bolsheviks to suppress Kornilov's forces further undermined its authority and boosted Bolshevik credibility. 4. The seizure of power. On October 25, 1917, the Bolsheviks, supported by the Red Guards and loyal soldiers, launched an armed insurrection in Petrograd. They captured key government buildings and stormed the Winter Palace, the seat of the provisional government. By the next day, the Bolsheviks had effectively taken control of Petrograd. Number 5. Formation of a Soviet government. The Bolsheviks established the Council of People's Commissars, with Lenin as chairman. They immediately issued decrees on land, transferring land ownership to the peasants, and on peace, calling for an end to the war. Early Soviet policies and the Civil War. After seizing power, the Bolsheviks faced numerous challenges in consolidating their rule. They implemented radical policies to transform Russian society and economy while dealing with internal and external opposition. 1. Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. To fulfill their promise of peace, the Bolsheviks signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in March 1918. This treaty ended Russia's involvement in World War I, but came at a high cost, as Russia ceded large territories, including Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states. 2. Civil War. The Bolshevik government faced fierce opposition from various factions, including the White Army, a coalition of monarchists, liberals, and other anti-Bolshevik forces, foreign interventionists, and nationalist movements. The Russian Civil War, 1918 to 1921, was a brutal conflict that resulted in widespread destruction and loss of life. 3. War Communism. During the Civil War, the Bolsheviks implemented war communism, a policy aimed at centralizing the economy to support the war effort. This involved requisitioning grain from peasants, nationalizing industry, and abolishing private trade. While it helped the Bolsheviks win the war, war communism caused severe economic hardship and widespread famine. Number 4. The Red Terror. To suppress opposition, the Bolsheviks launched the Red Terror, a campaign of political repression and violence carried out by the Cheka, the secret police. Thousands of perceived enemies of the state were executed or imprisoned. The legacy of the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution had a profound impact on Russia and the world. It marked the beginning of a new era in Russian history, as the country transitioned from an autocratic empire to a socialist state. 1. Establishment of the Soviet Union. In 1922, the Bolsheviks formally established the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, a federal state based on socialist principles. The USSR became a major world power and a symbol of communist ideology. 2. Impact on global politics. The Russian Revolution inspired communist movements worldwide and led to the establishment of communist regimes in several countries. It also contributed to the ideological divide between capitalism and communism, which defined much of the 20th century. 3. Economic and social transformation. The Bolsheviks implemented policies aimed at creating a classless society. They abolished private property, promoted education and healthcare, and sought to industrialize the economy. However, these policies often came at a high human cost. 4. Cultural changes. The revolution also had a significant impact on Russian culture, as the Bolsheviks sought to create a new socialist culture. Traditional institutions such as the church were suppressed, and new forms of art and literature promoting socialist ideals emerged. 5. Controversial legacy. The Russian Revolution remains a controversial event in history. While it aimed to create a more equitable society, it led to authoritarian rule, widespread repression, and significant human suffering. Its legacy continues to be debated by historians and political analysts. The Russian Revolution of 1917 was a watershed moment in history, bringing about profound changes in Russia and influencing global politics for decades to come. It was driven by deep-seated social, economic, and political grievances and shaped by the actions of key leaders and mass movements. The revolution's outcomes, both positive and negative, continue to resonate in the modern world, highlighting the complexities of revolutionary change.